Hello to the planet, or at least those interesting parts of the planet that have the internet. My name's Trevor and I'm a huge nerd, and today I've decided to wear one of my nerd shirts in order to prove it, because I'm going to be running thin on nerd cred after this video, because I'd like to talk about something that is very popular with nerds, but not so popular with me. And that thing is Star Trek. Now, most people who watch Star Trek, I would say, would admit that it's a boring show. And a lot of them just don't like it because of that. But a lot of them will say no, but it's boring at times, but it's a very intelligent show. There's good science, good politics, good characters. I'm only going to be talking about one of these things today, and that's the science. But I'm going to also say that the characters are indeed very simplistic, and the politics often doesn't make very much sense, in my opinion. Uh, but one thing that definitely doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time is the science. And to give Star Trek as much of a chance as possible, you might be thinking, well, nobody knows theoretical physics. And that's true. Well, some people do, actually, but most people don't. And so I'm going to let that go. I'm going to say, if you fuck up the physics, fine. We'll let that go. I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to exclude the original series and talk only about Next Gen. Now, the reason I'm going to do this is because Next Gen actually had science advisors on it that were supposed to be telling the scriptwriters if the science they were putting in the show actually made any goddamn sense. And in fact, I remember seeing one documentary in which somebody says this really cunty thing. I think it's actually Gene Roddenberry himself, the creator, the fucking LA pig who created Star Trek and who would flip his shit if you didn't call him the creator. I think it was actually him who said, "We had science advisors vetting all our scripts to demonstrate that all of our science was accurate." And either they didn't listen to these people, or these people were actually homeless crackheads who they just thought were scientists because they were good con men. So, I'm going to talk not about physics, and not about the original series. I'm going to talk specifically about mistakes made about biology in Next Gen. And not even all of biology, because trust me when I say a lot of biology can get way more complicated than physics, believe it or not. But only one very basic part of biology that you learn about in middle school, and that is evolution. Uh, so let me start by saying there's an episode of Next Gen where we learn that the Star Trek writer's view of evolution is exactly the same as Ken Ham's view of evolution. Ken Ham is the creator of Answers in Genesis, the organization that attempts to pollute the minds of children with biblical nonsense. And he has espoused a view of evolution of things just sort of changing into other things on the fly. Like there will be a velociraptor just sitting drinking malt liquor in an alley with its boys, and it'll just somebody will say abracadabra or something, and it'll turn into a crow. And that's basically the view of evolution that the writers of Star Trek seem to have, because there is an episode in Next Gen where there's this planet of people who's persecuting these group of X-Men, basically. Only instead of having superpowers like X-Men, they will just occasionally spontaneously turn into balls of glowing semen. Or as the show puts it, beings of pure energy. I prefer balls of glowing semen because it's much more accurate. But anyway, so yeah, that's really, really bad. Evolution is just things change into other things. I'm also going to reference, because I've seen a documentary where a science advisor actually talked about being handed this script, where the crew of the Enterprise starts de-evolving into earlier forms of animals. And it's just like, no, that's that's not a thing that happens. Like, and he basically told him straight up, like, this is some bullshit I'm giving you. It doesn't actually make any sense, but neither does that script. They didn't pull the script, obviously. They just ran with it because that was nice. There's also a thing about Star Trek that never made any sense, but science advisors or no science advisors, it happened in the original series a lot, so they were stuck with it. And that is aliens fucking and making babies. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, there are plenty of David Icke, like, conspiracy theorists and Atlantis people and UFO abduction experts and all manners of crazy, insane people who think this is possible. But it isn't for a very simple reason. And that is, when you fertilize an egg, the transcription and translation complex of that egg takes the DNA and starts building proteins with its ribosomes. I'm going to have to assume that all of this works the same in the alien species, or you're not even getting to this point. You have to have the ribosomes, you have to have some kind of DNA, some kind of protein, some kind of genetic code. Now, we are currently, humans, scouring our solar system for alien life, right? And if we find any, the first thing we're going to do is look at its genetic code. We're going to look at what the exact combination of three nucleotide DNA sequence, three-letter DNA sequences take to read out a particular amino acid in a protein. This is because the odds against having the same genetic code in different origins of life is completely astronomical. It's ridiculous. If you want to know, the odds are 64 choose 20, and if you put that into a calculator, I guarantee you'll get an error. I haven't even tried. You'd have to write some code, and I'm not even sure that would do it under normal circumstances, in order to get the answer for just how unlikely it is to have the same genetic code. Now, admittedly, that's a bit simplified because the code is degenerate, so you can actually have some switches that wouldn't actually change what proteins were built. But the odds of getting that are still astronomical, right? It's not worth considering that two randomly selected groups of life would have the same genetic code, which is why you would immediately check the genetic code of any life in space to see if it came from the same origin as we did. And we know how to do that now. One way you could do it is by fucking it if it was fuckable, right? It might not be fuckable. It might be like a pine tree or something that it wouldn't even be clear how you would fuck it, or it might be like a horse or something that only weird people would want to fuck, or like a fat person or something like that. So in that case, you might not want to test if it has the same genetic code by fucking it, but you would do it somehow. But if it doesn't have the same genetic code, then half of the genetic material that comes from the dad will just be totally misread by the ribosomes and will produce proteins that are completely useless and may indeed be deleterious. It won't work at all. It will be terrible. It won't grow to the size of 2 cells. It will die immediately. So in order for it to be possible for aliens to fucking make babies, they'd better have the same origin, right? And by the way, once a genetic code is set, it doesn't tend to change for this exact reason, because if an organism had different genes that produce different kind of ribosomes that would create a different genetic code, that would be really bad, because a lot of the proteins would just be non-functional and the thing would die before it ever lived. So there's all that. So anybody with any science background at all, right? This is high school level science knowledge, would know instantly on being able to fuck aliens and make babies would know instantly, right, that the origin is the same. So there's this episode. It's actually a two-parter. So these episodes of Next Gen, where an archaeologist, because that's the person who would make this discovery, obviously, not one of the many ridiculously large number of biologists, it would be an archaeologist, uh, would discover some kind of evidence or something that all the life, all the humanoid life, not only had the same origin, but was created by, like, some Jesus species or whatever. I'm gonna call them the Jesus species. And so, it's never actually said that this is given as an explanation for why it can fucking make babies. I feel like, though, that has to be why these episodes exist, is they were getting so much shit for this that they had to explain it somehow. But the problem is they didn't explain it at all, right? They created more problems than they started with, because now you have to explain why nobody noticed, right? Why the second somebody fucked and made a half alien baby, somebody wasn't instantly like, it really, really seems not only like this life has the same origin, but it has an intelligent origin. And the reason the origin you'd expect to be intelligent is that having the same genetic code isn't enough, right? Pine trees have exactly the same genetic code you do, and fuck one. See what happens. What's gonna happen isn't a baby. So even less ridiculous examples like that, like horses and donkeys can fuck, and they can actually have kids. The kids can fuck anything they want. They're infertile. And horses and donkeys are very closely related. No, and so, in order for it to not only have the same genetic code, which tells you it has the same basic origin, you would also have to have just structures and things that were close enough to produce viable offspring. And we know the offspring are viable because there are cases of that in Star Trek, whatever. Uh, that basically would put the nail in the coffin for any kind of just totally random evolution. That would indeed be evidence of intelligent design, and everybody would recognize it immediately. And so, just this idea that it has to take an archaeologist to figure this out, and it's really controversial when he does, and somebody didn't just say it instantly 80 million years ago or whenever, it's just absurd. And it's basically it's not only unscientific, but it's also insulting to science, because it's 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 a thing that we would know instantly, and that's not what happens in Star Trek. So yeah, like this video if you also hate Star Trek, and if you don't hate Star Trek, I'm going to ban your comments. Just kidding, but enjoy your day.